Hey, welcome to the Randy Karraker Show, brought to you by our friends at DraftKings, where the crown is yours. There's Matthew Rocchio getting ready. He's rubbing his hands together like he's about to do something evil here. Happy New Year, everyone. Hope everything was great during the course of the holiday season. Great to be with you here on STL Sports Central. And Matthew, we got some stuff to talk about today. We're going to talk a little bit about Seattle. We're going to talk a little bit about the Mariners. Heck, you know what? Our rivalry with Seattle changed actually because we used to hate the Seahawks. Now, at this point, I like the Seahawks a lot.
Yeah. I never think anything negative about Seattle. I think, you got robbed of a basketball team in a fashion. Hopefully that wrong will eventually be righted. But yeah, I mean, the Mariners have always been kind of a fun team. I kind of always root for them to have a little success. But now the Brendan Donovan trade talks have really spilt over. And I thought it was just my Twitter that had gotten taken over, Randy. But then I was checking out our videos here in STL Sports Central, and Joe Roderick and Brendan Schaefer did a great video breaking down the potential of Brendan Donovan going to the Mariners. And I mean, just to be completely honest, it's one of our most seen videos, and that's because it broke through the Mariners fans' algorithm, and there was a ton of comments here. And Mariners fans, obviously, backed by the reporting that has come out, right, which spurred the video, which is they're not going to try to move from the major league roster to get a Brendan Donovan. But the original kind of shoot the moon idea we had, that is mentioned also in this video, of Senja and Montez, is basically referred to as laughable by a lot of Seattle Mariner fans. And honestly, I agree with them. That's probably too much dip on the chip if you're the St. Louis Cardinals. But just the overall reaction of a potential Brendan Donovan trade by the Mariners fans to an STL Sports Central video, it shocked me, it surprised me. But hey, like you said, I'm glad to have a little consternation with Seattle again.
Well, and I kind of get it. I mean, they're the one that they've got something that they can cling to.
Yeah.
They're the only ones that have this. Colorado has been to a World Series. Florida has been to a World Series. Tampa Bay has been to a World Series. As far as I can tell you right now, the only team that hasn't been to a World Series is the Seattle Mariners. And maybe that's what the fans want to cling to there. They don't want to get one of the best winning players in all of baseball on their team because it's kind of that lovable losers mentality. You know what happened to Cubs fans, Matthew, when they finally broke through and won the World Series in 2016. What do you have to live for? Same thing with Red Sox fans after 2004. They said, I'm going to die with a loser. Maybe that's what these Mariners fans are angling for. Maybe they just want to stay away from winning. They're this close. And a guy like Brendan Donovan can put them over the top. And maybe they don't want that guy. Maybe they don't want to win a World Series or even be in a World Series for that matter.
Speaking of some of these comments, I'm going to pull some of them off the video right now, and I'm going to show them to you, Randy, so you can react to them. One of the comments we got, and this was a long one, from a Mariners fan. He came in and said, delusional. Brendan Donovan's last 3-year average is less valuable than 2024 Dylan Moore. Better contact, but no speed. 2 WAR utility infielders are a dime a dozen. That comment did continue to go on and say, there is no way in hell that the Cardinals are getting a major league pitcher or a top 100 prospect for him. He's worked much less than the A's gave up for a Rosarena.
Well, all I can tell this person that is typing in a very lucid and well thought out comment, but half the teams in baseball are interested in Brendan Donovan. And sometimes, and I think we're seeing this in baseball, and fortunately for the Mariners fans that do want to win, a guy like Jerry DiPoto understands the value of having a player like Brendan Donovan on the team. Sure, Brendan Donovan is not a superstar. We've made that point clear here. But you aren't getting the 2025 version of Roberto Alomar. That guy is not out there. Ketel Marte is not a guy that the Mariners apparently are interested in. The guy that they're interested in is a guy that can do a lot of things really well, but doesn't do anything great. And that's what Brendan Donovan is. But does Brendan Donovan help a good team that's right on the edge of getting to a World Series like the Mariners? Does he help them get to a championship? Matthew, I don't think there's any doubt about it. And I would say that this fan probably is a math nerd, right? Probably a fan of math, looking at the WAR, and has never watched Brendan Donovan play. That would be my belief.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, a lot of this was the fans reacting to the idea that he would get a starting pitcher, and again, the reporting and common sense told you that that probably wasn't going to happen. Maybe one of the lower ones who's low on control, you might have been able to break him off, but probably it was unlikely, and so
Oh.
they're reacting to something that wasn't really being discussed as like a legitimate theory. Is one thing I would throw out. Here's another one of the comments we got from them. Donovan is a good player, but he is not a great player. He's practically a platoon player because he's horrendous against lefties. Zero chance that 2 years of Donovan nets an M starter.
Well, and again, he is an everyday player. He's way better than a platoon player, and he is good, but not great. I will acquiesce to that, but that doesn't mean he's worthless. Tommy Edman was the NLCS MVP for the Dodgers a couple of years ago and has continued to be an everyday player for the best team in baseball. And Brendan Donovan and Tommy Edman are very similar players. They're guys that you can play a lot of different positions. They're guys that come up big in the clutch. They're guys that field well. Good but not great is not a two-time Gold Glove finalist, especially now when we are using metrics to determine our Gold Glove winners. Good but not great is not a Silver Slugger finalist. That is much closer to great than horrific. And again, I would guess that this person has not watched Brendan Donovan play on a regular basis. And you know what?
Yeah.
If they don't want him, there's somebody else out there that, and I know that Jerry DiPoto probably does, but Brendan Donovan is going to move to a good team, and he's going to wind up being an effective player for another team. And I think the fan base will probably change their mind once they get a chance to watch Donovan play every day.
Here's another one that I thought was fairly well thought out. Let me just get this up on the screen.
Okay. This
Randy,
is fun.
because
I like this.
I mean, yeah, they honestly the fans, and this is just what I'm pulling off of our comments on STL Sports Central's videos. There was long threads I saw going back and forth between Cardinals Twitter people and Mariners fans about this topic. The return for Donovan is going to really disappoint. You know what the Mariners gave up to get 2.5 years of Arozarena, who was an all-star? They're number 12, number 22, and another unranked player. This is pie in the sky.
Well, I think at that point, Randy Arozarena was having a bad season. They were desperate for a bat, and even though the Mariners guys, and I don't even remember who it was that they got for Arozarena, but Tampa Bay is pretty good at evaluating other teams' talent, as we found out when the Cardinals traded Arozarena to Tampa Bay. But I don't know if it's pie in the sky when there are multiple reports all over the country, including nationally with Jeff Passan and Ken Rosenthal, in addition to Derek Gould here and Katie Wu, who is here and in LA. You've got so many people reporting that he's such a valuable commodity. Even Jeff Passan in the last couple of days, right, Matthew? Talked about how the value of Brendan Donovan is going up now rather than down. I think I might have a tendency to believe those people that are talking to baseball executives on a regular basis, rather than somebody at a keyboard in Seattle who's saying that the return is going to really disappoint. Again, I know there is competition for his services. Now, it also depends on what people are thinking the return is going to be. I'm not expecting at this point to get one of the Mariners' top 6 starters. As a matter of fact, because of the deals with Boston, Matthew, I really think that the Cardinals are probably not looking as hard at a starting pitcher because they have Fitz, because they have Dobbins, because they have the starters they have. Not that they turned down a starting pitcher, but my guess would be that the Cardinals are looking for another high-level pitching prospect or a position player. And I would be surprised if the Cardinals' first choice right now would be to go after a starting pitcher. Think about the fact that the Cardinals, we thought, and we brought up the name Chris Bubich, and the Cardinals have no interest in him. They don't want a lesser control starting pitcher. They don't want a pitcher back with 2 years. They aren't trying to win the World Series in 2026. And I think that's one thing that fans of other teams need to understand, that the Cardinals are gearing themselves for 27 or 28 and aren't really looking hard at having a stud starter for the 2026 season.
Yeah, I think that the last thing you're saying is also a good point. So on the Arozarena trade, by the way, since they're comparing it, Seattle moved Brody Hopkins, who at the time had pitched in high A. He pitched in double A this whole season for Montgomery, and then Aiden Smith, an outfielder, was also the second minor piece. He went from A ball to high A ball this year, also in the fall league for the Rays organization. And there was a player to be named later who it doesn't look like has been named yet based on Baseball References list. So yeah, that's what the move was for Arozarena. I just think, to your point, Arozarena was coming off a little bit of a downswell, if you will.
He was in the midst of a really bad year, and he rebounded with Seattle.
And I think if we just compare to what you were talking about earlier about the reports, I don't think there were 15 to 18 organizations who were all very interested in Randy Arozarena at that point, which certainly changes the amount of value we're talking about in this situation. By the way, just throwing out what you're saying, a lot of outfielders in the top 15 of the Mariners system, not just Montez, obviously, who's the big name. Johnny Farmelo is a high A 21-year-old lefty, 6'2", 205. Kid's a big kid. They got two other outfielders as well. Yorger Batista, 6'1", rookie ball lefty, and another lefty outfielder in Ty Pete as well. Jesus Christ, does anybody hit righty and play outfield anymore?
No,
I guess, yeah, Lord Almighty, I guess not anymore. I think the one thing here is a lot of just were people reacting in the comments who see some people shooting big. And listen, I'm not trying to point fingers here. I was the one who I threw out Senja and Montez as a possibility. Again, too much chip on the chip there. That's not going to happen. But the bottom line is I don't think there's going to be a lot of Cardinals fans who are disappointed in the return of Brendan Donovan when it finally happens. But I do think what we're going to see is that when Brendan Donovan does get moved, there will be a section of whatever fan base it is who probably don't see the value, who haven't read the reports. And of course, why should they read those reports? It's about a different player that might not be on their team at the time. So they haven't read the reports. They don't realize all these factors that obviously people who cover the Cardinals, people who cover national, people who have talked to these GMs and things like that they're making the deal and that's affecting the actual value.
Yeah. And everybody is going to have a different rating of a particular player. For example, when Albert Pujols came up in 2001, he wasn't a top 100 prospect. He had raced through the minors in 1 year. He might have just inched into the top 100. But the Cardinals are going to have a different view of a particular player than MLB Pipeline is, and Baseball America is, probably than the Mariners have. And so the Cardinals will wind up with somebody for Brendan Donovan that they really like, as we know, Matthew, because they aren't going to trade Brendan Donovan for somebody they don't like. They aren't trading him just to dump the salary like they were with Contreras and Gray. They're obviously going to move the guy because he has a particular set of skills that he's honed over several years. And if the Cardinals, you like that one?
Yeah.
By the way?
Yeah, I like that.
But I really do think that Chaim Bloom is telling the truth when he says, hey, we're just trading him to move him. We're going to move Brendan Donovan because we think he has tremendous value. And unless we do get tremendous value, then he's going to go to spring training with us. And I don't think the Cardinals would be bothered at all if they went to spring training with Brendan Donovan at third, Wynn at short, Weatherholt at second, and Burleson at first. I don't think that would break the Cardinals' hearts at all.
Not at all. And we'll go with one more comment that we pulled from our video. Another Seattle fan, and I think this is exactly right down the middle kind of thinking. Durangelo Senja is a headliner for Donovan, and the Cardinals should take that with a guy like Ty Pete and be thrilled. If you want MLB-ready stopgaps, you can have Emerson Hancock or Logan Evans. To Randy's point, no more need for MLB stopgaps. Let's keep the prospect train rolling. If it's Senja and Pete, who again we were making the joke that there's no all there is lefty hitters anyway. But I mean he's a high school hitter with good tools overall. Just put him stash him in and let him roll. He's got good speed apparently, and his best fit might be in center long term according to the MLB.com breakdown. So if that's the deal, a switch pitcher with crazy flame throwing potential, and then the other throw in is a guy who's 6'2" and might be able to play center field. Yeah, that's a winner of a trade. Absolutely, 100%. No one I think has a problem with that one. Everybody's happy. Let's go home.
Yeah. And I think the Cardinals would do well to get another center fielder into the system.
Absolutely.
And see if they can make another center fielder, because I don't think anybody is sure about Victor Scott II, and I don't think they're that Newt Barr is the answer in center field. And really, when you look around the outfield, Baez is on his way. I don't know if Nathan Church is a major leaguer. There are some players that have the chance to be good major leaguers, but the Cardinals don't have any stud, aside from Baez, any stud outfield prospects. So I think that they would like to go find themselves another guy with a chance to be a good outfielder, because they don't know about Walker. They don't know about Scott. They probably aren't going to have Newt Barr. They really don't know about him either. I think they'd like to have a little bit more certainty among their outfield prospects.
Yep, I'm with you on that one, Randy. We'll keep it in St. Louis here. We got some news over the last few days. Speaking of people outside of St. Louis reacting to some St. Louis-centric news, 3 Blues were named to Olympic teams, and at least 2 of them pissed off some section of Canadians. Overall, a lot of Canadians not happy about Jordan Binnington, considering the struggles he had. But then specifically, there was potentially some Oilers fans who got another stick in the side when Mattias Ekholm was not picked, and Philip Broberg was picked for the Swedish team. So some reactions to the news. Obviously, the Binnington to Canada news got a little bit of a shock to the system with what the Blues then didn't do against the Avalanche that very same day.
I wonder why fans, and I guess it's a bigger deal in Sweden, but as a Blues fan, I don't want Philip Broberg going to the Olympics. I look at what happened to the Tkachuk brothers last year. I don't want that happening to our guys. I would much rather have our guys staying home and avoiding injury. Now, if they're wondering why Jordan Binnington was picked, they weren't watching the Four Nations last year, and they haven't watched a lot of playoff hockey, because he's big game better. He's having a bad year, but he's a big game goalie. And Matthew, there was a story about Canadian goalies last year in The Athletic, and it's really interesting to look at the best Canadian goalies, and they really do have the best guys on their team. Canada is not producing good goalies anymore. So Binnington might be the best guy that they have available.
Yeah, I remember about a week ago when I was on with Cam. By the way, shouts to Cam and in the Blues for the interview they put up with him. That was incredible. Pat Maroon had a beautiful reaction to it as well. And speaking of that, while we're talking about Olympic teams and things like that, you see that Cam video, and again, the first guy who grew up in St. Louis and made it, and then to see the USA roster and to see 3 St. Louis kids. What?
Aside from Pat LaFontaine.
We don't talk about Pat LaFontaine when we talk about Cam Janssen. That's a rule. That's a rule that I've been given by Cam. We don't talk about he moved to Michigan when he was like 6, and so Cam says that doesn't count.
He played youth hockey at Kirkwood.
Yeah, but he grew up in Michigan. All right, I'm not fighting this fight with you. That's Cam's fight. All right, I'm rolling with my man. All right, I'm fighting the good fight for Cam. All right, but to see him talk about that, to see Pat Maroon's reaction to it, and then to obviously see then the Tkachuk brothers and Clayton Keller get named to the United States roster, so cool. What they've been doing, but obviously, Blues right now struggling a little bit. But I see your point about not wanting to deal with the Broberg factor. But I think it's one of those things where, especially during a tough season, having a young player like that get that acknowledgement, I think that means a lot for the Blues going forward.
Yeah, I think it's great, but it doesn't. It's nice for him, and it's nice to have good players. But if Ekholm winds up going for Sweden over Broberg, I want the U.S. to win. I don't want the best players on Sweden. So if they and Ekholm is probably better than Philip Broberg is, although Broberg brings a different skill set to the table. But I'll tell you what, if it's me, I would rather have the U.S. and Canada have the opportunity to face off in the finals. I don't want Sweden interfering because of the greatness of Philip Broberg.
That's fair. That's fair. Fine, we can have that. But also, congratulations to Colton Parayko, who is also accepted to Team Canada. Who honestly, I thought. I mean, if you've watched the Blues play, I think the defense around Binnington, we all can accept, has been pretty bad. And so to watch one of the defenders get accepted, I think if I was them, especially because Colton hasn't had the offensive season that even based off his regular season average, you'd be disappointed in. But based off last season, you're extremely disappointed in the offensive output from Colton Parayko. But not really a lot of overarching reaction there. I guess it's just goalies in hockey, man. People just can't not over focus on goalies in hockey.
And that's fine. I'm trying to. I guess Hill would be one of the guys, but
Yeah, maybe.
so the bottom line is they don't have an awful lot of choices. By the way, I don't know what the cutoff is here, but are we to believe now, for example, that Matthew Tkachuk is from Ottawa?
Uh,
Because when he was like 15, he moved to Ottawa and he was up
well,
there.
I think we can draw a line between moving to a state when you're 6 and moving to Ottawa when you're 15.
So where do we draw that line then,
I
Matthew?
think we're drawing the line there. If you ask Cam Jansen,
So somewhere between 6 and 15.
somewhere between 6 and 15 is exactly where we're drawing the line. Correct. And by the way, what I was going to get to is
Fair
me and
enough.
Cam were talking. I was throwing out all these Canadian goaltenders who had really good regular season stats this year, and every time I mentioned one, Cam's reaction was just kind of like, yeah, but is that the guy you're going to put in between the pipes in the Olympics? It's just like these guys don't have that stature. They don't have the clout. They don't have the experience in the big games that a guy like Binnington has. So, yeah, Wedgwood might be having a better season than him. Thompson might be having a much better season than him. But are these really the guys you're going to lean on when Canada needs to get a win in the gold medal game? And that was kind of Cam's point 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I think to your point, it kind of backs it up that there isn't really a killer in the Canadian goaltending group right now, except for Binnington, who, as we just talked about with Brayco, we can all acknowledge that he's getting left out on an island for a lot of these games. Yeah, the Nichukin goals last night are pretty bad goals that you want him to have, but we also acknowledge that goaltending in the NHL is a mental thing as much as it is a purely physical thing. There's momentum, there's confidence in the group in front of you, and I don't think anyone would blame Jordan Binnington. Not that they're expecting him to say it, but I don't think anyone would blame Jordan Binnington for, in his mind, not having a lot of confidence in the group that's in front of him.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Now, that being said, apples to apples, Joel Hofer has played better of late. So if you're going to base a player's viability for the Olympics on what he has done this particular season, you would put Hofer ahead of Binnington. But would anybody in their right mind put Hofer ahead of Binnington in an Olympic competition? I don't think so. I think you hit the nail on the head. When you get to this point, when the rubber meets the road, you want guys that have won big games in the past. And Vasilevsky is not from Canada, unfortunately. Bobrovsky is not from Canada. So you've got to find guys that have won at the highest level and are from that country. And the best guy they have, the best history that they have, is with Jordan Binnington. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And if I were a Canadian fan, I think I'd be really happy with the fact that Jordan Binnington has. If I watched Binnington in the playoffs against all 4 of those teams in 2019, if I watched Binnington in the playoffs a couple of years ago before he got hurt against Colorado, if I watched Binner in the playoffs last year or in the Four Nations, I have no problem with having Jordan Binnington trying to win big games for me.
And while we're talking about an international competition, there is some Blues news going on right now in Minnesota with the World Juniors. And let me get this a little bit more manageable. Let's just switch these up so Randy's the main person.
Okay.
That works for me. Because the round robin group stage of the World Juniors has wrapped up. And on a lot of these top 10 lists, there's only one franchise with 2 young players on the top 10 list, and that is the St. Louis Blues. Number 1 on a lot of these lists has been the defenseman Adam Juracek, drafted in the middle of the first round a few years ago. He has been incredible. If you guys haven't seen the between the legs goal that he had, where he was just sitting in the middle of the defense, one-on-one with the goaltender, goes between his legs and roofs it with one of the most impressive goals you'll ever see. He's being ranked as like one of the best players, if not the best player right now in the group stages. And then also in that top 10 list has been the goalie for the Swedish side, also a Blues Patrick, Love Harenstrom. 3 games played, 3 wins, 2.33 goals allowed, 720 save percentage. I know these kids are a long way away with the way the Blues are going right now. We got to start talking about the youth, and Juracek, again, a mid first round pick. He's lighting it up right now, and it looks like he could be up with the Blues maybe next season.
Well, and that's one of the reasons that people are talking about the Blues moving Justin Falk before the deadline, is because he is on his way, along with Lindstein. And then I love Harenstam. I think he's going to be great.
Nicely done.
No,
easy little single through the 5.5. Nicely played.
When the Blues lost Colton Ellis, they needed somebody to step up in their system, and hopefully he'll be the guy that because Binner only has 2 more years of control left, and he may or may not be back in his 34, 35 seasons. But if you have Hofer, you want to have a guy within your system, inexpensive, controllable, that you can count on to play 30 games. And hopefully Harenstam would be that guy, because I think the Blues were kind of surprised that Colton Ellis got claimed, and they wanted him to be part of the equation in the future. And obviously that didn't occur. But you hate to have to go out and find a free agent backup goalie. We've been there before with Chad Johnson and guys like that. And I just think every team is better off if they have a young guy. And the Blues have had really good success with young backup goalies. Obviously, Husso did very well for them when Jake Allen came up to back up Brian Elliott. He was terrific. And then Binner came up, and Allen remained a good backup goalie. So I think having a backup goalie from your system that and the demeanor of is a really valuable thing. So hopefully Harenstam can be that guy in the future.
Oh, I got unmute. One last thing from the World Juniors. A fantastic article on The Athletic dropped earlier this week, just before the new year, talking about one of the more surprising faces at World Juniors, and that's on the Swedish team. And the reason why I'm mentioning this here for St. Louis Blues fans is, one, because he potentially could be a top 3 pick, which obviously if the Blues continue on their trend this year, they could be picking pretty high this year. But the other factor is that this future top 3 pick is the little brother of current Blue Otto Stenberg, and that his brother's name's Ivar Stenberg. And the reason why he's raising eyebrows, and the reason why this article was done on him on The Athletic, is that he's kind of breaking a lot of the molds of young players in Sweden, in that right now he's on pace to set the record for the most goals, for the most points by a teenager in the Swedish professional league. And I think it was last year or 2 years ago, Anton Frondell, the year he was drafted in the draft, he set the current record. Frondell, by the way, went 3rd overall to the Blackhawks a couple of years ago. He's probably going to be up next year. He's going to be a very good player for the Chicago Blackhawks, unfortunately. So this guy's already passing a guy who just went 3rd overall. Obviously, Gavin McKenna had that incredible hat trick in the World Juniors as well. So it's fun to me because he's a Swedish kid. We know that Steiner's connection to that. The fact that his older brother's already in the Blues organizations, fascinating. This kid has, number 1 playmaking center kind of profile. And he's had a little bit of a slow start in the World Juniors, but I love little stories like this. I love obviously the brother stories, the family stories in the Blues and across the NHL. I just think it's kind of fun.
Well, and I think another part of this, and you mentioned Alexander Steen, he knows every young player in Sweden, and every young player and every father knows who Alexander Steen is too. So nobody would know a young Swedish player more intimately than Alexander Steen. That's why the Blues have had so much success drafting the Swedish guys lately. So if the Blues can get somebody that he knows and that knows him, I think that works to their advantage, because I think it gets that guy to the NHL quicker. If Steen has been advising the family as to how to, and obviously he has because of Otto being here, but if he's been advising the family and the young players as to how to get to the NHL more quickly, then that's a good thing. So maybe I don't know. Would you rather have a guy that they know, or would you rather have the guy that's the consensus number 1 in McKenna? I think I'd still rather go McKenna.
I don't know. It depends on the profile, and obviously, this is pretty, high level stuff, and I don't watch enough of these kids to really know. But for me, reading this article, and it was by Scott Wheeler back on December 29th. If you go to The Athletic, you can just search Ivar Stenberg, IVAR, and it'll break it down. My apologies. So he's 9 points clear of Anton Frondell, who was just taken 3rd in 2025 draft. So he wouldn't be potentially breaking Frondell's record for the best teenage season ever in Swedish history. He'd be actually be beating records that are set by players like Peter Forsberg and the Sedins in their post-draft seasons. And he's already 1 point shy of passing the 25 points that 2023 number 2 pick Leo Carlson registered in his draft year, and he's played 19 fewer games to date. So all of these Swedish stars who have come out, not just in the last 2 or 3 years, but again, going back to the Sedin brothers, he's producing better than, there you go. He's producing better than all of those guys at this age. That kind of profile, that's pretty special. But McKenna got $500,000 to play college hockey. That's also pretty special.
Yeah, McKenna apparently is uber talented, and everything that he does is uber scrutinized at Penn State, but apparently he's just loaded with talent. So I'm intrigued. Hey, when you're putting up numbers and you're comped with the Sedin sisters, you've got something going. So pretty good. And hey, you know, in the future, you'll be able to bet on whether or not the Blues, with that first or third pick, will take a guy like Stenberg or a guy like McKenna. And that's because DraftKings is finally here in Missouri. And you can make every game or every draft more exciting with same-game parlays and money lines and props and more, all from your phone. And Matthew, as you know, it's incredibly safe and secure and easy to use. I know you've been using it a lot lately. And right now, new Missouri customers get bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets instantly. There's no waiting, no nonsense, just pure action, powered by America's top-rated sportsbook app. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use this code STL Sports. That's the code on your screen, STL Sports. New Missouri customers bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets instantly. That's code STL Sports. The crown is yours in partnership with DraftKings Sportsbook.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 21 plus, physically present in Missouri. Eligibility and restrictions apply. Terms at DraftKings.com/sportsbook. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see sportsbook.draftkings.com/promos.
All right. Well, the DraftKings app was certainly active yesterday, Randy, as we were watching the college football playoffs. I'll tell you what.
How'd you do?
Not bad. I had to hedge a few times to kind of save some poor pregame parlays where I thought Texas Tech was going to actually, have an offense. And so I kind of had to do some damage control on some parlays because I went heavy on Texas Tech. And I just didn't expect that to happen.
I wonder if you put Texas Tech, and this is not an affront to them because I think they've done a really good job of buying and building a franchise. Cody Campbell, the billionaire down there, has done an amazing job. But I wonder if you do put Texas Tech in the Big Ten or in the SEC, how they perform. And I wonder if we might have just seen the difference in conferences with Oregon shutting them out. I think that's one thing. And I'm also, and somebody will come up with an answer someday, but I'm intrigued by the fact that here in 2 years in the 12-team playoff, we have a 1-7 record for teams that had buys. And I would think that will affect the gambling next year because we still haven't figured out why the teams with buys are losing. Ostensibly, they should be the best team. I think Georgia's better than Ole Miss. I think Ohio State was better than Miami. I don't understand. I do think that Oregon was better than Texas Tech, but I just don't understand why and Indiana's better than everybody. But I wonder why the teams with buys are 1-7.
And honestly, the only time Indiana didn't look dominant were their first 2 or 3 drives of the game. And so what is it about the long break that is putting these bye teams at such an odd, disadvantage? Sounds so stupid and like excuse making, but I think it's the truth. I think it's 1-7 the first 2 years. And again, even Indiana in a game they dominated got off to a slow start. And specifically go back to Oregon last year. Completely slow start, anemic, and they're down like 21-0 early on. It's not just bad games; it's slow starts that then turn them into really bad blowouts. There's got to be something indicative of being off for 21, 25, 20, 21, 24, 25 days, whatever it is, compared to a team that just played 14 days ago or 12 days ago, whatever it is.
I don't disagree with the overall premise that Dan Lanning had, that everybody should just keep playing. There shouldn't be buys. You play through. He said that everything should end on January 1st. I do disagree with that because people just aren't watching TV. You aren't going to get the viewership that you're going to get if you play the game on January 8th or 11th. I think, if you play the championship the 8th through 12th, that'd be fine. But in theory, I agree with Lanning, and I've thought this for a long time. And you could do a 32-team tournament super easily. You and I have talked about this, and don't bother with the buys and let teams just play it out. And I think you get a better idea of who the better teams are, who the deeper teams are anyway. So my idea would be to have only one bye week during the playoffs, and that would be for the teams that are playing in the championship game. You still have the January 1st bowls, and then the two teams in the championship game can play for the championship.
Yeah, this schedule is going to change, obviously, because the format's going to change a couple times here. But there's the other factor of the games. I know a lot of people are toying around this idea, but sports just changed so much in the last couple of years. I mean, we can talk about the 10-year like dynamic shift. And I was making jokes. Can you imagine going back 10 years ago, Randy, and telling someone that the two representatives in the college football playoff, you have to get that through somebody's skull over 10 years ago, get that prospect through their skull, and then explain to them that the two Big Ten representatives in the semifinals are the Oregon Ducks and the Indiana Hoosiers. They would murder you. They'd burn you as a witch.
Right,
They'd look at you like you're insane. All three of those things make zero sense to me. College football playoff, or Big Ten Oregon Ducks and Indiana Hoosiers being good at football. None of this makes sense. But then you minimize it to just the last couple of years, and you have the Indiana factor, but you have Georgia going down. You have Miami coming back. Ohio State faltering in the way they did. All those things happening is just we wouldn't have accounted for it 2 years ago. But these teams seem mortal. That Georgia team is a great example. Yes, part of it might be that clearly with the way he played, Carson Beck is a very good college quarterback. But the defense Georgia had when they were Georgia and they were going through that run, they would have stamped down Chambliss and maybe not. They wouldn't have shut him down, but they would have won that game, one way or another. And it's just talent is more dispersed now, and it's harder just to shit kick these teams when everyone else can pay players and match up in a lot of ways.
Which is why the transfer portal and NIL is great. I know there are a lot of complaints about it overall and about the way it's implemented, but that's the fault of the NCAA. But the fact that we have it, the fact that players do move and that teams have the opportunity to buy a better team, and the teams have an opportunity to utilize talent that's been developed by somebody else, that's a great thing, because it gives the Ole Misses of the world, the Indianas of the world, the Mizzous of the world an opportunity. And I think it's pretty cool that teams and fan bases that never had a chance to think about a championship before now have a championship to think about. And we wouldn't have thought that for 3 of the 4 schools in this 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. We wouldn't have thought of Oregon, Indiana, and Ole Miss as possibilities. We would have thought of Miami as a possibility. But I think it's awesome. Now, it can cause problems. Mizzou's going to lose half of their top 60 players to graduation or the transfer portal. They're going to get devastated on the offensive line in the transfer portal this year, and they'll probably have a pretty bad year next year because of it, but that's on them. If you are smart and you're judicious in the way that you use your funds to procure talent, you have a chance to be a really good football team on a year-to-year basis. You just have to play it smart. And I think, Matthew, one of the things you have to do, you have to keep guys happy. If you're losing 5 offensive linemen, 5 backup offensive linemen, there's something wrong there to the transfer portal. That means that for whatever reason, those guys are unhappy, or maybe they're not getting paid enough. So I think you really have to look inward. However, if you lose your backup kicker that didn't kick very well to the transfer portal, you have to thank your lucky stars if you gave him any money.
To Randy's point, let's split off here. Since the turnover to the new year, Mizzou has announced the official re-signings of Jamal Roberts, linebacker Nicholas Rodriguez, wide receiver Donovan Olubide, defensive tackle Marquise Gracial, quarterback Matt Zollers, and Trajan Greco is the most recent one. He was re-signed as of 1:56 p.m. on Friday afternoon. So those are all the players they've officially re-signed. We also got the news that Caden Green is going to be sticking around. Keegan Trost is off to the draft. And also the other news, Josiah Trotter, the son of Jeremiah Trotter. Josiah Trotter has also declared for the draft as well. So the defense taking a big shot. The depth on the offensive line, as well as at least one starter, taking a shot as well, with Keegan Trost declaring. So there's some of the Mizzou football news. But back to the big questions here. Obviously, the Ole Miss game was incredible, and really that the Ole Miss game, I mean, just Chambliss is such an interesting story because he wins 2 national championships at D2 Ferris State, transfers to Ole Miss, doesn't even have the job locked up, and then he obviously takes over and gets to the point where he's showing out on the quarterfinal stage and will have a chance to continue leading this Cinderella story. It was, for me, it was just, I've been thinking a lot. We've been talking a lot about quarterback development. We've been talking a lot about the importance of transfers and how you build your roster. And while in the next 6 or 7 minutes, I'm going to say some very negative things about Lane Kiffin, credit to the Ole Miss staff and group like that going into this year for locking him in and continuing that quarterback development, because clearly they've continued the development from what he had at Ferris State, because he was balling out against Georgia last night.
Yeah, he has been terrific. Obviously, Lacey has been great. They built a really good offensive line, and despite what happened against Georgia, and they did allow a lot of points, but they have a great defense as well. Their talent evaluation is great. And ultimately what it comes down to is the desire of boosters and people in the administration to build a great football team. And Lane Kiffin is a guy that builds with cash, but he also identified the right players to get them to where they are right now. And he had a really good coaching staff too. He's for all of the negative things you're going to say about him, he is a really good coach. He's got a really good record. He's a strange guy, but he's a really good coach. And you know what? That program should be thankful to Lane Kiffin, even though he hung them out to dry, and even though he left them in the lurch. Long term, that program is going to benefit because Lane Kiffin was there, and they know now what the program is capable of. And Pete Golding was going to be a head coach somewhere, and he's a really good fit at Ole Miss. He was a defensive coordinator under Saban at Alabama for a few years. He's a really highly thought of defensive mind, and will remain their defensive coordinator. So I think at the end of the day, Matthew, as much as they might despise Lane Kiffin with good reason right now, I think 10 years down the road, if this program remains on this trajectory, they might be thankful that Lane Kiffin got them into the position they're in.
Are you on the Schadenfreude train of how hilarious it would be if Ole Miss does win this national championship?
Totally, 100%.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
As long as you're on that train, we're good.
Yeah,
that would be amazing.
Yeah. Now, the fact that LSU will have to pay him if they win the championship, but if you're LSU, you don't give him a championship ring, do you? And you keep him out. And I not only them, but I love the fact that ESPN kept him off the air. He was pleading with ESPN to be on the air this weekend.
Oh, really?
And everybody said, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. So it's got to just drive him crazy to have his team in the spotlight, but he is not in the spotlight, which is the thing that he most desperately wants and needs.
Which is why, reading now from ESPN, sources told ESPN on Thursday night that it remained unclear how many Ole Miss assistants who are joining Kiffin at LSU will be allowed to remain with the Rebels when they face number 10 Miami next Thursday in a college football playoff semifinal at the Fiesta Bowl in Glendale, Arizona. Offensive coordinator Charlie Weiss Jr., tight ends coach / co-offensive coordinator Joe Cox, wide receivers coach / passing game coordinator George McDonald, and running backs coach Kevin Smith have all signed contracts to coach with Kiffin at LSU. With the transfer portal opening Friday, today, sources told ESPN that the Rebels aren't certain they will have all those assistants with them when they play the Hurricanes in 6 days. A source said some of the assistants have apparently pushed back on leaving an Ole Miss team that is 2 victories away from winning a national championship. There are going to be some fireworks, quote unquote, an Ole Miss source told ESPN. We always knew this might be a possibility. Among the assistants who are going to LSU, only Weiss flew back with the Rebels to Oxford after Thursday's game. Sources told ESPN after the Rebels win that Weiss was expected to coach in the Fiesta Bowl, but sources also said that a plan was in place for the other LSU assistants to return to Baton Rouge, Louisiana to help the Tigers prepare to host prospects in the transfer portal this weekend.
That's a 45-minute drive from New Orleans to Baton Rouge. So I can get on the first day, and I'm sure that, well, Pete Golding said they were going to have a day off today. So if those assistants are participating in the first day of the transfer portal for LSU, maybe the second day of the transfer portal, but then they head back to Oxford, I'm good with that. But if Lane Kiffin doesn't allow those coaches to finish the job, I mean, that's what are we all taught as kids is, hey, if you start something, finish it.
Right.
Every kid who ever wanted to quit a little league baseball team, his parents said, hey, no, you started, you got to finish the job. Lane Kiffin, that's who he is. He doesn't finish the job. They know that at Tennessee, but they know that at FAU too. But not all of those guys don't want to finish the job. And I wonder if now, because they wouldn't let him coach at Ole Miss, and I kind of think this is probably the case, he is preventing those guys from being with that team out of spite more than anything else. I don't think it has nearly as much to do with LSU, Matthew, as it does to do with Ole Miss and the fact that they wouldn't let Lane Kiffin do a month-and-a-half-long commercial for himself at LSU as the head coach at Ole Miss.
Yeah, him being petty is the least surprising thing to start the new year. That's just, I mean, new year, same lane. But hey, I thought Stuart Mandel just put it the best way in his piece on The Athletic, in the way you were talking about it earlier. Just in this new era of the sport, and it undeniably is a new era of the sport. And if you didn't realize it before yesterday, last night should have been a wake-up call. And the best part about it is it feels like anybody can do what Indiana did. You get the right coach, you find the support from the boosters. And again, not everybody has Mark Cuban, but everyone has $1 million boosters. As we see, Illinois gets one of the biggest donations in college history from a donor. We know, obviously, some of the names connected to Mizzou. You get the right coach, you get the money behind it, you continue having a group that can coach up 3 stars and 2 stars into real players while bringing in portal people because you have the money. You can do things like win a Heisman Trophy at Indiana. You can be the number 1 team, and you can turn college football on its head. That's why the NIL and transfer portal are fun. That's why the college football playoffs fun. And that's why, if this is the new era of college football, I'm all in.
Well, and here would be the best scenario if it would play out this way, is if Lane Kiffin would leave Ole Miss because he knows he could win a championship at LSU, and then Ole Miss would win the championship, and LSU would be caught up in this maelstrom of mediocrity, not mediocrity, but just everybody having a chance. Alabama, by all rights, should be right where they were when they had Nick Saban as their head coach, but they aren't. Look at what Miami has been through over the years, and there's no guarantee Miami will win a national championship. All the money that Phil Knight has put into Oregon, they haven't won a championship. All that money Cody Campbell has put into Texas Tech, they haven't won a championship. There are a lot of programs out there that are spending a lot of money, LSU under Brian Kelly, and they aren't seeing that return of a championship on their investment. I think it'd be really fun if, for at least the next several years, if Kiffin would miss out on the opportunity to win a championship and Ole Miss would have rings from 2025.
Yeah, that would be absolutely incredible. Speaking of things that'll be absolutely incredible, Randy, how about the timing here? Shouts to Pete Thamel for putting this out right before we wrap up the show. Randy, let me let's throw this up here. And let me pull this up so everyone can see what we're talking about. The Flash, apparently official. Ole Miss quarterback Austin Simmons plans to enter the NCAA transfer portal per an ESPN source. He's entering with a no contact tag with Missouri as the favorite to land him. He's expected to stay with Ole Miss through the college football playoff. Randy, we talked about it. It didn't seem like you could really seemingly go into next season with only Matt Zollers as the most experienced quarterback on the roster. They were going to have to bring in some kind of veteran. The question is, what veteran would be willing to go to Missouri and potentially not start? Well, Austin Simmons will be a junior next year. He's thrown 107 passes for Ole Miss the last 2 seasons. He has 6 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. He obviously earlier this season had a little bit longer of a stretch in his career. He started the first 2 games against Georgia State and Kentucky. He had 3 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. And then obviously Trinidad Chambliss did what Chambliss does this season. But there's some interesting news, a little wrinkle in the Missouri quarterback room potentially for next season.
And I wonder what happened, because when Kiffin left Ole Miss, his dream scenario was to develop Simmons and have him become his number 1 quarterback. And everybody thought that Simmons would follow Kiffin to LSU. Well, Brandon Sorsby is visiting LSU, but he's also visiting Texas Tech. I thought it was an absolute lock that Simmons would wind up at LSU with Lane Kiffin. And to have him be headed to Mizzou is shocking, pleasantly shocking news. I have to believe, Matthew, that they're going to pay him more than they're going to pay Zollers, right?
Yeah, you think so?
Maybe it's the same, but wow, I am really surprised. But I'm also glad that, as opposed to Bo Pribula last year, and this is nothing against Pribula, but I'm glad that Simmons is staying with Ole Miss through the college football playoff. If anything would happen to Chambliss, he's their backup, and he would have the opportunity to play. And he's not stuck. And so Mizzou doing the right thing on 2 fronts. Number 1, getting a quarterback to compete with Zollers. And number 2, getting a guy that is playing on a winner and has a chance to win a championship. And they are taking that chance of winning a championship away from Austin Simmons.
Yes, and looking at Austin Simmons, he was a 3-star as a prospect, 6'4", 215 from Moorhaven, Florida. And like we said, over 100 passes in his first 2 years. And I assume he'd have 2 more years of eligibility here for Ole Miss. And I have overtaxed my computer. I hope I'm not frozen, Randy. Am I frozen?
No, you aren't. You're fine. You're good.
All right. Sorry. My all my web pages are freaking out right now. All right. Sorry.
Okay. So let me throw one other thing here.
Interesting move.
And I know Eli Drinkwitz was complaining about tampering a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about it here on the show. But if this guy is going into the transfer portal with a no contact tag, are you telling me there wasn't tampering by the University of Missouri? There's got to be something. He's got to know somebody there, right?
Yeah. Or maybe Austin Simmons just saw the best starting spot, the best starting position in the SEC. The best chance for him to be a starter in the SEC.
But why would he have not followed Kiffin to LSU? Kiffin has money, right?
Yeah,
and Kiffin has a job open right now. Now Sorsby might take that job, but why wouldn't the guy follow the coach and the system that he knows? Kind of a strange thing, but good for Mizzou.
Yeah, it looks like Sorsby's going to get snapped up by Texas Tech. I think. I don't know if they're going to let him get out of Red Raider country without dropping an absolute bag at his feet.
I love that.
With the kind of money they have right now. That's the big report right now is Sorsby to Texas Tech. And obviously a day after you have no offense, it certainly seems like a good move. You're right, though. That is kind of surprising. But maybe there's a loyalty factor.
Maybe he wants to go to the J school.
Okay. That sounds like when we talk about the zoo. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's not. Maybe he's a little miffed with what Kiffin did as a guy who's been there within the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously he got benched by him, but I mean he wasn't playing that great. So I'm sure I don't know if he's maybe miffed by that or something like that, or if something along the conversations this last year, him and Lane did not see eye to eye on certain things, and maybe that's why.
So even if it's that though, there's going to be 30 really good teams that need a quarterback. Indiana's going to need a quarterback. Iowa State's going to need a quarterback. Penn State, James Franklin's going to need a quarterback. Alabama's going to need a quarterback. There's a lot of schools out there that are going to be looking at it. It's awesome for Mizzou. It'll be interesting to find out. It will hopefully be interesting to find out how and why Mizzou landed Austin Simmons. Hopefully they're able to get some offensive linemen to protect him.
Oh, of course, I didn't even, obviously, I don't know why I didn't immediately think of this. I'm not very smart. Everyone's joking that, man, losing Simmons to Mizzou and then Chambliss to LSU is really going to suck. So maybe that's the thought process there is the quarterback he elevated and developed and pulled out of D2 is really the guy he's going to be targeting, which in hindsight, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. That's great stuff. And this has been fun. Are you going to be tuned into the NFL action this weekend? Are you going to watch tomorrow?
Randy, can you in your history, can you remember? And obviously, it would have been week 17 that I'm referring to, not a week 18, but a week 17 with 4 division titles on the line. This has got to be one of the only times in the last 25 to 40 years this has happened.
Oh yeah,
4 division titles.
Yeah, no doubt. And somebody asked me this morning, they said, who's going to win the Super Bowl? I said, it's so wide open. I really have, Matthew, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears won the Super Bowl. I wouldn't be surprised if the Packers won the Super Bowl. Wouldn't be surprised if the Broncos or the Chargers won the Super Bowl, even the Texans. Anybody who's in this field, I think, has a chance, some better than others. But I just run down the list, and the NFC South winner, I don't think is going to win the Super Bowl. But anybody else who's in the hunt, I think has a chance, which is as wide open as I've ever seen it. And yeah, I think to your point, to have all these divisions being settled on the last day, the NFC South, the AFC North, the AFC West, I guess, is if the Chargers win and the Broncos lose, right?
Yeah.
You've got a lot of different opportunities here.
AFC North, AFC South, NFC West, NFC South.
Yeah,
is the divisions that are up. I think the AFC West is locked up right now.
That's right. Yeah. Chargers and not Chargers, Seahawks and Niners are playing for the division title. You're right.
Yes. So and that's another one. I mean, neither of those teams would surprise me with what they've done this year. Certainly New England, Buffalo. God, none. Yeah, you're right. Nothing other than the AFC North and the NFC South. No, other than those representatives. And I guess if the Ravens do come out of the AFC North, it wouldn't. I'm thinking that too.
Yeah.
I mean, Lamar could, pull a rabbit out of his hat and go full MVP quality Lamar on us for a round or two. So I guess that would be
they've got the defense
shocking.
Through the middle of the season. Their defense was the best defense in the league.
Yeah, that's a really good.
In the first 5 games, they were bad. In the last 5 games, they've been bad. But the middle 5 or 6, they were the best defense in the league. So they're capable of doing it. So I think, and if the Steelers beat the Ravens, the Steelers aren't going anywhere. But now they'll probably win. But I'm amazed at how wide open this looks.
Yeah, and combine that with the fact that it's not just the 4 division titles, both number 1 seeds also have not been clinched. And I have a feeling that combination going into the last week of the season, this has to be one of the only times in NFL history we've ever seen this before.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And by the way, all the people that are upset about the Chiefs being shoved down their throat, no Chiefs football in St. Louis this weekend on TV. How about that?
Oh, wow. There we go. We finally get a little respite.
Yeah, we do. Now, I think, does KMOX still air? They still have the Chiefs games, right?
I believe they do.
So our friends at the Mighty Mox will shove them down your throat. But yeah, they're showing the Broncos-Chargers game, I think, on at 3:25 on CBS. So if you don't like the Chiefs, this is your weekend. And Randy, and playoff weekend.
While we're talking about the NFL, I just want to bring a little background onto the show, and that was I texted you a trivia question that a friend of mine had sent me. And the funny thing is the friend of mine actually phrased this in a fantasy mindset about having back-to-back receivers lead the league in fantasy points. I went ahead and checked it off, and I found out that only 2 times in NFL history has a team had 2 different receivers lead the league in yards in back-to-back years. The first time it ever happened was in 72-73 when the Heralds of the Philadelphia Eagles, Jackson and Carmichael, led the league in receiving back-to-back years. The only other time it's happened, Randy, this blew my mind, and the only reason I even got close to this guess was because of a name that Ricky Prohl mentioned in his interview with us this past week. Mm-hmm. Because the only other time it's happened in NFL history is 2004 and 2005 when Muhsin Muhammad and Steve Smith of the Carolina Panthers, thrown to by Jake Delhomme. I could not believe it. Muhsin Muhammad went for 106, 1,600, and 16 touchdowns in 2004. And then Steve Smith, Muhsin Muhammad goes off to the Bears. And then Steve Smith has his biggest year in NFL history. Just everything because when you talk about Jake Delhomme and just zooming out, because we're talking about quarterbacks, The idea that in the early 2000s, three of the best quarterbacks, all who went to Super Bowls, Jake Delhomme, Kurt Warner, and Tom Brady, were all these nobodies when they got to the NFL, and all of them set records for quarterbacks, whether they won Super Bowls, set records like Delhomme did with those guys, or obviously what Kurt Warner did. Man, they used to develop quarterbacks in this league, Randy.
Oh man, and they still should. They should. By the way, because you gave me you pointed out that it happened in the early 2000s. So the first thing you think of in St. Louis is Bruce and Holt, right? But then you think about Reggie Wayne and Marvin Harrison, or you go back to the 80s and you think about Mark Clayton and Mark Duper with Miami. You think about Jerry Rice and John Taylor, or Jerry Rice and T.O. with the 49ers. So many great receiving combos. Hines Ward and Mike Wallace. You would have thought that somebody else would have done it besides just those two pairs of receivers. But that's a great trivia question and a great stat.
Musa Muhammad, I had no idea he absolutely went off, and just that Panthers offense they had Deshaun Foster and Stephen Davis as the running back combo. The defense, I don't think we ever talk about that defense enough. Chris Gamble is one of the most talented pure athletes to come out. He was a two-way player at Ohio State. Dan Morgan's in the Hall of Fame. Julius Peppers is one of the most talented players we've ever seen. Chris Jenkins is a nose tackle that no one talks about, but we should, because he was a monster for a decade plus as a nose tackle in the NFC South. I mean, I'm blanking on the name of the safety they had there. They had a really good safety.
At number 30.
It wasn't Mike Minter, but I'm blanking on the name of the safety they had back there. That was a fantastic, fun Panthers team. That's one of those teams that, because they lost the Super Bowl, they never got the flowers they deserved. That roster was incredible. That roster was so much fun. And obviously, unfortunately, St. Louis fans know that for a bad reason, as I think, honestly, your best ever joke really proves it out. The buying a Jason Sehorn jersey.
Oh, for $2.99, $2.99.
And putting a footprint on it, a cleat print on it, is one of the best jokes I've ever heard, Randy. Fantastic stuff.
That was a fun Halloween jersey.
Fun with NFL here as we close out the show.
Yeah, so it'll be a fun weekend of NFL action, and then next week we've got the college football. We'll have the Blues to talk about, and I would think now that we passed the first of the year that we will see a Brendan Donovan trade, much to the chagrin perhaps of Seattle Mariners fans. But you can watch this again on YouTube and see us all the time, and we'll be back at it on Monday at 3:00 Central, right, Matthew?
Yes, sir.
That's Matthew Rocchio. I'm Randy Karraker. Thanks for joining us here on STL Sports Central. We are presented by DraftKings, where the crown is yours. Have a great weekend, everyone.